بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. وقال تعالى في مقام آخر لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به إن علينا جمعه وقرآنه فإذا قرأناه فاتبع قرآنه ثم إن علينا بيانه. صدق الله العظيم. وقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس منه فهو رد أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Continuing with our series, inshallah, this week we wanted to highlight some of the methods that are used in preservation of hadith. Since we were starting the book of hadith, inshallah, one of the few things that are completely relevant and very, very important in studying the ulum al-hadith, the knowledge and the sciences of hadith. Inshallah, we will discuss that today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala primarily highlighted 4 responsibilities of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in multiple places in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in one of the verses, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ بَعَثَ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. In this verse, and there is more verses similar to this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned 4 responsibilities. Number 1, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, that we have chosen a prophet from within themselves, meaning a human, a person who belonged to their clan, their area of living, and we gave him 4 responsibilities. First and foremost, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِ, which is he would recite the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the people. Number 2, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, he would teach them the book. Again, one is just reciting the book, one is teaching the book. Inshallah, we'll get into a little bit of detail of that later on. And the third responsibility, wal hikmah, and wisdom. Teach him the book and wisdom. And number 4, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and he will purify them. And obviously, purification is talking about the perfection of akhlaq, manners and morals, ethics, and all the different aspects as Sharia outlines to make us a perfect human being. And obviously underneath this classification, underneath this category, every kind of inner disease would be there. From rights of humans to rights of animals to the diseases that we carry, such as hatred, just inside of us, all of the different types of diseases that we carry. So all of that would fall under وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he used to receive revelation, there were multiple methods that were practical in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam receiving revelation. Obviously, we're not going to get into the details, but the scholars have mentioned multiple methods. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was very eager to memorize the message when it was being revealed to him. So whenever Quran was being revealed, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would try to repeat after Jibreel alayhi salam and would try to memorize that message. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, correcting this method, mentions in the Quran in Surah Al-Qiyamah, لا تحرك به لسانك لتعجل به. Do not move your tongue trying to haste what is being revealed to you. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took upon himself 3 responsibilities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these verses, in the same surah, إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا جَمْعَهُ وَقُرْآنَهُ, and ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانَهُ. There are 3 responsibilities. Number 1, إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا جَمْعَهُ. It is compulsory upon us to compile it. Jama'ah in the Arabic language means compilation, to gather different verses into one compilation. Number 2, Qur'ana, the recitation. And number 3, ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا بَيَانًا. And we have taken the responsibility, we have taken this responsibility to clarify whatever needs clarification. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We are the ones who descended this remembrance, الذِّكْر. وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ, and we shall protect it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly took responsibility of the preservation of Quran and anything that is relevant to Quran. And obviously, we know Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was sent, as it comes, that one of the responsibilities of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابِ, as we just learned, to teach them the book. Now, if you were to just ponder over the types of people who existed in Arabia at that time, they were the best people to understand the language. If handing over the book was sufficient, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wouldn't have to elaborate it to clarify any message from Quran. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was sent to this world. He was sent and he was given the prophethood just so that he can teach the different clarifications and the different verdicts that needed to be clarified in Quran. So all the ahadith are actually in its clarification of Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took upon himself to protect it. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect this regardless of what happens. From the day Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam received the revelation all the way until the day of judgment, until the last heart is beating with the kalima la ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect this the dhikr. And as we, inshallah, we'll go into a little bit of detail as to the importance of chain of narrators in Islam. This is something very, very unique in Islam that you will not find in any other religion. That from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, any message that was transferred, a transfer that was transmitted from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Sahaba, and from Sahaba to the Tabi'een, from the Tabi'een to the Tabi'een, and to the generations to come after that, every single message is being preserved with the person transmitting that message. So when we look at the preservation of this message, it's not just the preservation of the message itself, but also the preservation of those who are transmitting it. So it's both. It's actually the preservation of matan as well as the preservation of the rawi. The person who's narrating it, the narrator, and what is being narrated. Both things are preserved from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam till today. You know, we say this with a lot of confidence that, majority of our history books, if you were to look into the history of Islam, so, some famous personalities that we will encounter, just like Allama Waqidi, Ibn Hisham, they're not mufassireen, they're not muhadditheen, they were just historians. They only published books that are related to history. But even them, in history, they felt the obligation to mention the narrator and along with the narration. They are quoting what? History. Not anything to do with religion, but just the history of Islam. They also mention narrations. They also mention the chain of narrators just so that they can authenticate the actual message which is being transferred from generations to generations. And if you look at it uniquely, some of our history books carry more authenticity than a lot of the divine scriptures of other religions. Because obviously when it's being transferred from religion to religion, from generation to generation, there is no concept of making sure that the actual words are not changed, the translations are not changed, and the person who is narrating it actually reaches the standards and is up to par, and he has the capability of narrating that narration. The muhadditheen, they were so particular in taking narrations that if they were to see one person doing something against Sharia, they will reject all of it hadith and they will not take anything. They had maintained standards to make sure that nothing is transmitted from generation to generation without having the highest form of preservation. There was a story that a muhaddith, he traveled very far to listen to a hadith that one person used to narrate. When he went there, he saw that the person was out in the field and he was with his herd of horses and his goats. And this person, he had a bag. And when he was calling his horse wouldn't come. So what he had done was he took that empty bag. It was an empty bag. And he pretended like there was food inside. And he presented to the horse. So the horse came close, thinking that there was food inside. And when he came close, he grabbed the horse and he put it away in the stable. The muhaddith, he saw this action from this person, and he said, I cannot take a hadith from this person. I cannot take the hadith from this person. So when they asked him, what was the reason that you did not mention that hadith, you did not narrate that hadith from that individual? He said that when I went there, I saw that if this person can lie to an animal, I cannot trust him with the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the standard that they had established. This is the standard that they have established, that any time any person does anything that is against the principles of Islam, and if he's caught doing anything which leaves the boundaries of Islam, they would reject anything that he would say, and they will not take any of his words. And there are over 30 different variations as to what the conditions must be like for a person narrating hadith. And obviously the sciences of hadith are, if we were to get into the details of that, we would be here for days and days. This is the entire art as to how the hadith was transferred. But again, we wanted to just keep it very brief and to the point. So inshallah, we'll move on, that there is actual 3 practical methods that were used in history in preservation of hadith. There were 3 practical methods. Number 1 was memorization. That they used to memorize. The Arabs, they were known for memorizing everything. They had brilliant memories, to the extent that forget their own lineage and the lineage of their forefathers, they used to memorize the lineage of their horses. Because obviously we know the Arabian breed of horses is something that is very known amongst those who hold this kind of a hobby, that they used to also memorize the lineage of their horses. And many narrations come that different Sahaba and different Tabi'een and Muhadditheen were tested by different leaders in the past to see if they make any mistakes. Inshallah, I'll mention 1 or 2 stories. Imam Bukhari mentions a story of Hadha Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. He said Marwan once called him and he said, mention to me some stories. And he told Abu Zur'a rahimahullah that sit on the side and note down everything that he is mentioning. So Hadha Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he mentioned numerous ahadith. The number is unknown as to how many he mentioned. So Abu Zur'a radiallahu anh, rahimahullah, sitting behind the curtain, he copied down all the ahadith. Exactly after 1 year passed, Marwan called him, as Abu Zur'a rahimahullah mentions, فَتَرَكَهُ السَّنَةِ ثُمَّ أَرْسَلَهُ إِلَيْهِ. He left him for 1 year, full 1 year, and then he called him, and وَأَجْلَسَنِي وَرَاءَ السَّتْرِ, and he made me sit behind the curtain. فَجَعَلَ يَسْأَلُهُ وَأَنَا أَنظُرُ فِي الْكِتَابِ فَمَا زَادَ وَلَا نَقَصَ. And I was following the scripture that I had written 1 year ago, and he mentioned the same exact ahadith in the same exact order with the same exact wording. فَمَا زَادَ وَلَا نَقَص. He did not increase a word and he did not decrease a word. Similarly, Imam Bukhari, very famous muhaddith, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shower His blessings on him. He used to attend in his prime age, when he was still studying, he used to attend the durus of different teachers, but he would never write any notes. So obviously the classmates, they were very patient for a while, and they said, this person, he doesn't write any notes. He just comes, he puts his head down, and he just carefully listens to the teacher, and he gets up and he walks away. He does not write any notes. Now, the teacher is putting so much effort to narrate these different narrations. He's making sure that he's taking into consideration the chain of narrators and making sure it's connected to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So much effort has been put by the teacher, and this person is sitting in the majalis, in the company of the teacher, and he does not take any notes. So they waited and they waited and they waited. Then obviously a time came when they were comfortable enough, and they asked him, they said, what is wrong with you? You come to the majlis and you sit in class, you do not take any notes. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah said, bring me your notes. Bring me your notes. He brought, all the students, they brought their notes, and Imam Bukhari from day one, for one full year, he was continuously all the different lessons that were given over a period of 1 year, he recited all of those ahadith without increasing or decreasing a single word of the hadith. This was the memory of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. And if we were to look at this, if we go into, if you were to just look at the wording, Imam Bukhari, which is Imam Bukhari's text, the classical text, which is Sahih al-Bukhari, in the Hashi of that, a classmate actually of Imam Bukhari, he mentions, فَزَادَ عَلَى 15 آلاف حديث فَقْرَأُهُ كُلُّهَا فِي ظَهْرِ قَلْبٍ. He mentioned 25,000 hadiths that day. 25,000 hadiths that day that he read from memory. Obviously, if you were to look at it, one full year of hadith lessons. 1 full year. 25,000 hadiths. This is a person that was a classmate to Imam Bukhari. He mentions this, that day Imam Bukhari recited 25,000 hadiths. One more very, very interesting story. Hada Wahshi radiyallahu an. Once he had moved away from Medina, he moved to a place called Hims. So Hada Abdullah bin Adi bin Khiyar radiyallahu an, him and a friend of his said, let's go visit Wahshi radiyallahu an. So they set out and they traveled. And it was the habit of the Arabs that whenever they would travel, because of all the dust that would fly in the desert area, they would cover their entire body, including their face. The only thing they would leave open is sometimes only their eyes, and sometimes only one of their eye, because of all the dirt that would come onto their bodies. So now Hadrat Adi bin Khiyar, Abdullah bin Adi bin Khiyar, radiyallahu an, he traveled from Medina to Hims, and when he reached Hada Wahshi radiyallahu an, Hada Wahshi radiyallahu an was sitting under a tree. And he looked up and he saw that Hada Abdullah bin Adi was mounted on his horse. He's covered from head to toe. The only thing that was visible was his feet. He was covered all the way to his ankle. From his head to his ankle, the only thing that was visible was his feet. He looked at his feet and he said, are you the son of bin Khiyar? Are you the son of Khiyar? Khiyar bin Adi? Adi bin Khiyar? And he said, we have never met before. How would you say that? How would you make this claim? And how could you ask me if I'm the son of Adi bin Khiyar when we never met ever? He said, when you were a child, when you were still suckling child, somebody gave me when you were an infant, somebody handed you over to me and told me to give you to your father. And at that time even, your entire body was covered, but your feet were visible. At that time, when you were a suckling child, I saw your feet, and now the same feet that he saw that were covered in dirt, in dust, after so many years. And the amazing part is Hafiz ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari, in the Hashia of Bukhari, he mentions وَبَيْنَ الرُّؤْيَتَيْنِ قَرِيبٌ مِّنْ 50 سَنَةً, that between these two visits, they were almost 50 years apart. They're almost 50 years apart. So he saw the feet of this child 50 years ago. And he's looking at the same grown man 50 years later in the desert, mounted on a horse, and his entire body is covered. But by looking at the feet, he said, aren't you the son of Adi bin Khiyar? This is the memory. This is the talent. This is the reason why Arabs were chosen to spread the word of Islam. This is the reason. Subhanallah, if you were to go into the talents of Arab at that time, subhanallah, you'll never find, if you were to compare and analyze the area of the status of the world at that time, to analyze where Prophet ﷺ, where else could it have been said, there wouldn't be anywhere else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew where to send his Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And going on, obviously we know that a person who became Muslim yesterday would actually know a few verses of the Quran today. Last month we had a conference in Hamilton, Ontario. Sheikh Ibrahim was mentioning a story that once there was a debate of some Christian. He came into the masjid in Delaware, and he mentioned that, I'm going to challenge any person who says that Quran is more authentic than the Bible. I'm going to challenge them and bring me anyone. And obviously, we know that, the emergency number was called and Sheikh Ibrahim was flown into Delaware. And obviously, he was put on the spot. So Sheikh Ibrahim just went to him and he said, let me tell you one thing. I'm going to ask you one question in front of everybody. Think of your answer. He said, I'm going to call a child who is 10 years old, who is 9 years old, and he's going to recite the entire Quran from the beginning till the end. And obviously this is what we do for a living. We're continuously in the madrasa, and all we hear is Quran being recited daily. And we know that there could be a few dozen kids that can recite the Quran from the beginning till the end without even hesitation. So Sheikh Ibrahim mentioned that I'm going to call a kid and I'm going to make him recite the entire, as much as you want. From wherever you want, as much as you want. And I'm going to ask you to bring anybody, including your Pope. These are the words of Sheikh Ibrahim. I'm just quoting him. He said, including your Pope. And I'm going to ask him to recite one verse of the Bible that he has memorized word to word, as it was revealed to Hadith Isa alayhi salam. And immediately, the case was over. So this is the beauty. And as we know, memorization, from the youngest child to the eldest person, every person has a portion of the Quran memorized. And this is something, a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us that He's going to protect His dhikr, His remembrance, His Quran, His hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect it. When the British were in rule in India, they used to actually come into the masajid and try to get rid of and try to demolish the evidence of knowledge. But one thing, once they walked into the masjid and they saw that there was a teacher sitting and there was students sitting in front of him, he's reciting a verse, they're reciting a verse after him, they can take all the Qur'ans they want. Then that's when they decided that this is not going to work. This is the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it does not matter. You take away all the books, you take away anything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect this work, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regardless of what happens. Regardless whether the disbelievers like it or they don't like it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen to protect this word. Obviously, this was the first method, which was memorization. The second, which is very, very powerful, is the principles of practice, which is better known as ta'amul. Ta'amul, and obviously, if you were to look at a lot of the principles of fiqh also rely on ta'amul. As you know, if you look at kids today, when you bring them, they have never read any book, they have never been taught anything, but they will know how to read the entire salah. Why is that? It's because they have seen us pray. They know that, okay, dressing in this manner is sunnah. Why? Because they have seen us dress the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dressed. They know the way we behave, the way we talk, the things that we communicate with, the way we live our lives. If it's according to the sunnah, this is ta'amul. We are living the Quran and the hadith. And obviously the highest example that we will find is in the lives of Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in, and the Tabi'een and the Tabi'een and the muhadditheen and the mufassirin, the great scholars of Islam. They lived and they looked and hunted for sunnahs, and they would want to practice it. They would want to bring it into their life. Even if it's the smallest sunnah, they would bring it. Hadha ibn Umar radiallahu anh, whenever he used to travel, sometimes he used to take his horse this way, sometimes he used to take it this way. The path is straight, and he's sometimes going this way, sometimes going that way. So when his companions would ask him, he would say, I saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was traveling, I think he stepped in that direction. So I would take my horse in that direction. Then I remember that there was a tree here, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped here. So he would stop there. And he knew that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rested somewhere. He would stop there and rest. Even though these are the sunnahs that have nothing to do with religion, but Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh and thousands of Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in would do everything to make sure that they adopt the sunnah and the lifestyle of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, even if it had nothing to do with religion. Even the things that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did as a habit, the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'in would also do this as a habit. And this is ta'amul. We will see when you're sitting in a class with your teacher, you will see the way he behaves, the way he talks, the way he dresses, the way his manners and morals are. All this is a complete replica of Quran and Sunnah, and this is exactly how it's transferred from generation to generation to generation, all the way till it comes to us. This is the second method of preservation of hadith. And last, obviously, the most practical method which is now used is documentation. As we know that different muhadditheen in different times have compiled different books of hadith in their times as they felt the need. And there are so many different types of hadith books. Some of them were divided based on the narrators. So all the ahadith narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh would be in one chapter. All the ahadith narrated by Umar radiallahu anh, one chapter. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, one chapter. These are different. This was one compilation, and then some compilations are divided by the way the fiqh chapters are divided. Tahara, Salah, Sawm, Hajj, so on and so forth. So there are different compilations, and every muhaddith divided and compiled his book based on his taste and how he would want to compile. But there were 6 authentic books which are globally accepted by the mass of Muslims, and obviously we know those 6. Top of the list, which is given the title Asahhul Kutubi Ba'da Kitabillah, the most reliable and the most authentic book after the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Quran, is Sahih al-Bukhari. And Imam Bukhari, he has a little over 7,000 ahadith compiled. To be exact, is 7,275 ahadith, and he compiled it in the year 256 Hijri. And the second, number 2 on the list is Imam Muslim's compilation, which is known as Sahih al-Muslim, which has roughly 9,200 hadith, and it was compiled in 261 Hijri. And number 3 is Abu Dawood, which was compiled in 275 Hijri. Then after that, it comes Imam Tirmidhi's compilation, which is known as Sunan al-Tirmidhi or Jami' al-Tirmidhi, which was compiled in 279 Hijri. And number 5 is Ibn Majah, which was compiled in 273 Hijri, and Nasa'i, which was the latest compilation of Imam Nasa'i, which was 303 Hijri. So majority of the compilation of hadith that took place, that are accepted by the mass of Muslims. Again, they were compilation from the time of Sahaba Ridwanullahi Ta'ala alayhim ajma'in. And obviously there is one of the best and the most comprehensive book to study on the preservation of hadith is by a contemporary scholar, as we know, Sheikh Ibrahim, and he has this book called The Preservation of Hadith. It's actually the introduction to the book of Tahara, but now it's been published separately. So anyone who is interested in studying the sciences of hadith and how the hadith was preserved, inshallah, if you want to look for more details, The Preservation of Hadith by Sheikh Ibrahim is there. So inshallah, we will end with this, and then inshallah, we will move on to starting the book in our next session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to value the effort that was put behind preserving the hadith, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to search for sunnah and practice upon everything we learn. Ameen wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير